You know, every once in a while, people, families, even churches go through what we call defining moments. I'm sure you've experienced them in your own life. A defining moment is that time, that moment in your life when you make a decision, but it just doesn't impact where you are at the moment, but it impacts not only you, but other lives for the future. I like to refer to these times as a Kairos moment. In other words, it's a specific time, a God-ordained time when we have an opportunity to change the lives of future generations. Some of you might remember when this church used to meet on Market Street more than 30 years ago. Well, as the church grew, Pastor Ray Cotton told me that one of their biggest problems was finding parking for all of the people. Eventually, the church started buying up land in the neighborhood and demolishing the house for a few extra spaces. When I heard this, I thought to myself, wow, what a great story. But what is even more amazing is there was a time when there was just no more room to grow. There wasn't anything else they could do. And so Pastor Ray told me what they did. They just dropped to their knees and they prayed. After a while, they thought they found a solution. A larger church with a much, much bigger sanctuary was for sale. They planned to purchase it, but then that opportunity fell through. That wasn't the plan God had for Central Community. And so the church, yet again, went to God asking for His direction. We know how this story ends because we know where Central Community Church is. But did you know the land that our church is on used to be a dairy farm? I've met with a lot of people who are pillars of this church, and they tell me that's where I would go to get my butter and my eggs. That's where I would go to get my milk. Pastor Ray shared with me that as he began praying for this church, he was aware of this property. As the leader, he started talking, and he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Farmer Meese. I'm going to go knock on the door, and I'm going to ask him if he would be willing to sell his property so that we could build a church on that. And that's what he did. One night he knocked on the door. Farmer Meese came to the door, and Pastor Ray introduced himself and said, hey, I want to ask you, would you be willing to sell your farm? We'd like to build a church on it. And Farmer Meese started laughing. He told me, Pastor Ray, he said, you could never afford this place. And besides, I'm going to leave it to my children. Pastor Ray told me he went home feeling a little dejected, but he wasn't defeated by any means. So guess what the church did? Once again, the church went back to their knees in prayer. Well, Pastor Ray told me, he said, Bobby, whenever I would drive home, I would drive past this farm. And there were times that I would pull over and I would get out of my vehicle and I would go out into the middle of the pasture and I would pray. I asked him, do you remember what the prayer was that you prayed? And he told me verbatim. He would get down on his knee and he would say, dear God, you know we need this land more than these cows do. Would you please give us this land? Soften the farmer and knead his heart so that we can purchase this land and build a church that's going to transform lives. The church continued praying, and one day Farmer Meese called the church, and all he simply said to Pastor Ray was this, make me an offer. So the church got together and they pooled their resources. They were able to raise $400,000 of it, and they got Farmer Meese to carry the note for the next 3 years on the remaining $600,000. Isn't that amazing? So they've got the land. Now it's time to break ground. The cost of the sanctuary back then was $12 million. In today's finances, that would be $33,480,000. And you know what's amazing about that? The church only had $23,000 in the bank. Interest rates were at 22%, and there were less than 300 families in the church. Now, I don't know about you, but that tells me there were some people who were willing to step out in faith. The church raised $7 million, and they financed the other $5 million. And now we have this incredible sanctuary that we have today. And on the very first Sunday, when they met for worship in 1987, more than 5,000 people showed up. That was a defining moment for our church. Another defining moment came in 2004. That's when we built the atrium. At that time, the church was struggling financially. We were $10 million in debt. I was an associate pastor here, and then we would get our paychecks on Friday, and sometimes they would tell us, just don't cash it until Wednesday. Oh, I remember those days. But once again, the church stepped out in faith. They trusted God, and you know what? In 2004, they burned the mortgage, and we were completely debt-free. Isn't that amazing? A third defining moment happened when we completed the chapel in 2020. We've had over 225 services in the chapel. I mean, the amount of lives, the number of people who have been changed because we have this building is nothing short of a miracle. I think about a funeral I did recently for a 22-year-old girl who was killed in a car accident on 235 right by our church. It was just a horrible, horrible time. We had her service here, and you know what? Now her entire family calls Central Community their church home. And you know why they're here? It's not because of our building or anything like that. It's because they were loved the way they needed to be loved in a very difficult time. The faithfulness of the people in our church is building the kingdom of God in ways you and I can't imagine. I think about all of the faithful people who trusted God with their time, talents, and treasures. I think that about the congregation on Market Street, and I think about Farmer Meese. They planted trees that were going to provide shade for people that they would never get to meet. People have met Jesus, gotten baptized, and found life transformation because of their faithfulness. Maybe your kids accepted Jesus in our church. Maybe you got baptized here. Maybe you found a deeper, more meaningful relationship with God because you stepped into our church. In 2023, we baptized more than 75 people. One was a young woman who had tears running down her cheeks because she couldn't wait to get into the water. She's the only person in her family who was baptized, and she's setting the example for them because of your faithfulness. Another woman in her 80s grew up in this church. She was married by Pastor Dale back on Market Street. Now she lives in Arkansas, but Central is still her home. She felt called to be baptized, so when she was back in Wichita last fall, she called Pastor John and he baptized her on a Thursday morning. The staff all went to watch, and we were all clapping and whooping as she came out of the water. Central Community Church matters to people. The work here and that we are doing is changing lives. We're reaching people across the street and across the world. Man, that pulls at my heart. That's what happens when people step out in faith. That's what happens when you invite God into what we do. And now we find ourselves at another defining moment. Here's what our grounds look like right now. We've got this beautiful building. When it was built, there was nothing like it in the United States. They modeled it after the Crystal Cathedral in California. But now it's 2024, and guess what? This building has aged. Our air conditioners need to be replaced. The roof leaks. The stucco and the flashing have problems. If you look closely, you can see places where water comes running down our walls. When we got 4 inches of rain last fall, we walked into the sanctuary to find ceiling material all over the pews because so much water came in, and that's just the visible stuff. Obviously, this just doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time. But we've got such a great maintenance group that they've been able to take care of our facility and hide the little flaws as they show up. But now we're at the point where we can't do that anymore. Here's some of the damage that you see on the inside on those big, beautiful glass windows. These are special windows that are only manufactured once a year in Canada. They cost $3,000 per pane. We've got to come up with something else that is more cost effective. Here's our parking lot. It's kind of funny. We had a visitor who came to guest services recently, and she said, "Oh, I just love this church. It makes me feel like I'm so much at home." But then she said, "I gotta tell you, I feel like I lost my car out in your parking lot in one of your potholes." Now let's take a look at the roof. We have about 25 HVAC systems that need to be replaced. I can't remember a day when I haven't seen the Roth Heating and Air truck at the church doing everything they possibly can to keep us running. But those old air conditioners aren't going to last much longer. There are so many other places that need work too. Here are the doors where we bring the camels in for Christmas. You can see all of the rot and the damage that is taking place. That's just another example of the many, many small things that need our attention. So as we started looking at this, we started thinking and dreaming, what are some things that we could do that's not only going to fix the wear and tear that's occurred, but also give this church a new sense of curb appeal? What are some things that we can do that when people drive by on Maple, they can see that the outside tells the same story of what's happening on the inside of the church? Now, why is that important? Here's why. We've learned that when people drive by our campus, they decide within the first 8 seconds if this is some place they see themselves staying. They are asking themselves, is this where I see myself in community? That's the importance of curb appeal. And we want this place to scream, yes, you can see yourself at this church. We've been seeking God's plan for the church, and we've realized it's time for a refresh. This is our defining moment. So here are the things that we believe God is calling for us to do to prepare this church for the next generation. Let's start in the parking lot. We have an incredible preschool at Central that was voted best preschool in Wichita in 2022 and 2023. And there's a school that also meets. Almost 300 kids come through our building Monday through Friday. This connecting drive gets used a lot. It's time to pave it. In addition to that, we want to resurface and reconfigure the southwest parking lot so that it's easier to navigate. There will be other places that we will work on also, like where the lady said she almost lost her car. The existing driveways are going to remain, but one of the things we're going to do is replace the fountain with a gathering space. I have to tell you that fountain just drains our budget. It's not cost effective or even efficient. And so we want to transform that area into something that's more usable in the life of our church. We plan to put in artificial turf and picnic tables. We'll be able to play games here and maybe even have food trucks. But when people drive by our church, we want them to clearly see that this is a place where community happens. Next, we want to make sure that our building is the most presentable it can be. We started thinking, how can we make it look like everything works together and not just a hodgepodge of different building projects? We've hired architects to start dreaming about how to make the sanctuary from 1987 look like the chapel from 2020. Isn't this beautiful? We're going to take these top pieces of glass, which leak, and replace them with the same shingles that we have on the chapel. This will help us control our water damage and become even more cost effective. Another thing we are going to work on is helping people understand the best ways to enter the church. One thing we learned in our survey is that we have a lot of doors and people aren't sure which ones to use. So we're going to consolidate everything and create clear paths for entry by replacing some of the side sanctuary doors with windows and covering them to protect people from the snow or rain when they enter. And take a look at this. Right here, did you notice that we built an overhang so that people can be dropped off and go right into the church without having to be out in the elements? Our goal in the parking lot is to make everything cleaner and better aligned so it's easier to move around in. Isn't this all beautiful? By working on the exterior appearance of our building, we are subconsciously drawing people in. They will notice how beautiful the campus is, and they will want to know what's happening inside. So now let's take a look at what we're planning on doing on the inside. Here is the grand foyer. We don't want to do any remodeling, but we do want to refresh the look. We want to put new finishings on it. We want to add new LED lighting, which will not only brighten this space, but will also be much more cost effective. In addition to that, we're going to put a new coffee area in. This encourages people to gather and link, build relationships, and build community. Now, let's move over to the atrium. Oh, how I love this room. And so much of our church life happens right here. But we've also recognized that it has its own problems. Maybe you've noticed, but it's loud. There's no ceiling, and so the sound just bounces all over the place. You can't have a meeting or receptions in there because it's impossible to hear. So we're going to put in a ceiling that will help absorb the sound and fix the acoustics. We're also going to add some new finishes to refresh the look and bring in some bigger tables that will help us keep the room set up more permanently. And just outside those doors is our beautiful chapel garden, but you can't see it. So we're going to turn this wall into windows. The changes we make in the atrium are going to make this room come alive so that it can better serve all of us in the life that happens in this building. Okay, now let's talk about the sanctuary. This is an incredible room that we have for worship and teaching. We know we need to make some changes, and we also know we only get one chance to do it right. So we've been praying what we can do in this room, not only to update it, but so that when people walk in, they know that this is a place where worship happens. There is so much to fix. If you go to the stage, there are holes and trays that we put in for cables and other tech equipment. It's really a tripping hazard. We want to get that all fixed up to make it look not only cleaner, but be much safer for our speakers and worship leaders. And if you spend some time looking around the room, you'll notice that a lot of pieces don't look like they fit with the others. Over the years, we've pieced a lot of new tech together as we've needed equipment upgrades. The video wall, projection screens, organ pipes, stage layout, it all needs to be rethought. We're going to intentionally design the room to keep it neat and clean. But these upgrades just aren't for the people who attend in person. We have so many people who join us for worship each and every weekend by live streaming. On an average Sunday, we have more than 600 devices from all around the world who connect to our services. And as you know, there are lots of different places people can watch for incredible music and teaching, or just entertainment. In some ways, we're competing to get people to stay and worship with us wherever they might be. As we've reviewed our stream services, we've realized what a cluttered mess the stage is in the background. All of that said, here's what we're looking at doing to clear the clutter. First, we're going to move our screens and enlarge the platform out as far as where the lower thrust is now. This will bring the people closer to what's happening up front to draw them deeper into worship and teaching. This invites them to actively participate, no matter where they happen to be sitting. This also gives us much more room for our Christmas and Easter productions, allowing Pastor Phil and our worship ministry to be much more creative. We're also going to update the finishes, put a sort of modesty wall in front of the orchestra to hide all of the equipment, remove the fake organ pipes and build a soffit above the stage so that we can pull up and completely hide the LED video wall. But not all of the updates are just for appearances. We're also going to focus on the acoustics of the room so that we can control the audio better. One example is to treat the wall beyond the choir so that the sound of the stage doesn't get bounced all over. We're also going to update the lighting and other tech so that we have state-of-the-art equipment like a new soundboard so that the church is prepared for the next generation. But that's not all. Other improvements that we have in the works include updating our restrooms so that they not only look better, but smell better. We need to build a new maintenance shop so that our facilities crew can continue to manage this campus with excellence. And our children and our student ministries are going, so we need to do some minor renovations to the youth and the nursery areas. I want you to know that none of these plans and decisions have been made lightly. The church leadership team has been behind the scenes for months going over the data, meeting with experts, hearing from you, and most importantly, seeking God's wisdom and guidance as we pray on our knees. Looking back at how faithful God has been through the faithfulness of the people of Central Community Church, I am confident that God is going to know another miraculous work through us again. This is our defining moment. It's a time for a refresh, and I'm asking that you and your family will prayerfully consider how you can be a part of what God is going to do through us. One of my favorite movies is a movie called The Darkest Hour. It's a story of Winston Churchill. In one of the last scenes, we will find that all of the British soldiers are stranded on Dunkirk. On one side of them, they have a body of water. On the other side, the enemy is approaching. Winston Churchill calls all over the world, even the United States, asking for help, but no one came to their help. So he came with an idea. He simply decided, let's go to the people. And that's exactly what he did. He asked every person that was able to take their personal watercraft and go across the pond and pick up their boys and bring them home. And that's exactly what the people did. But some brought 10 and 15. Some brought 40 or 50 boys home. Others brought 1 or 2. Here's the moral of this story. Everybody just did their part, and that's what I'm asking you to do. I'm not asking you to do anything extravagant. I'm simply asking you if you would just do your part. If everybody at Central just does their part, this project will get done and God will get the glory. Right now in your meeting, there's a host with you. In just a minute, they're going to give you some additional materials and they're going to be able to answer your questions. I want to thank you so much for taking your time to listen to the dream and the vision that God has put on the leaders' hearts here at Central Community Church. And I just want you to know, I believe in you, I believe in this church, but most importantly, I believe that God is about to do something that we will be talking about for years to come. God bless you, and I'll see you soon.